Do people really understand the gravity of recent macro events? How about the yen? And how about Michael Saylor? He said he'd be willing to sell. We'll talk about that. That creates a huge rally in certain products, but then not Bitcoin. What exactly does that mean for both Michael Saylor's products and Bitcoin? And we're going to discuss Solana and XRP and this whole idea about, hey, well, before I get there, this is the market update, and I'm your host, Bill Noble. If you need a roadmap in crypto, subscribe to this channel. Turn on alerts so you know when we're going live. And if the content works for you, make sure you hit the like button. Okay, so what is happening this morning? Like what's happening the morning of June 30th? Is June 30th a big deal? What's it all about? Okay, so today, June 30th, is the ex-dividend date for STRC. Now, what's STRC? Well, you've heard about it from me, but I just want to tell you again. It's a preferred stock, so it's a combination of a stock and a bond, right? And what happens is Michael Saylor pays 11% interest to anybody who holds STRC. Now, if STRC is holding and is okay, that allows Michael Saylor to effectively raise money for Bitcoin purchases, pay the people who gave him money 11%. Now, that's a lot, and the whole thing depends on Bitcoin going up, right? If Bitcoin goes up, then, he can do certain things that allow him to pay the 11% yield. But if Bitcoin goes down and he still has to pay all that interest, MicroStrategy starts kind of sort of running out of money soon. That leads to MSTR strategy stock massively tanking like 40%. And even more shocking was STRC, which is primarily held by retail, completely panicking and goes from 100 to 74. And everybody goes, oh my God. And Michael Saylor becomes a huge headline. But you know what? Not huge enough. Like, some people talk about it, some people don't. But this has huge implications for Bitcoin and the whole crypto space. Now, yesterday, you had a huge rally in these two stock products, like Strategy's regular stock and MSTR. They were both up huge 12%. Now, let's talk about two things. First of all, when you have a rally of that size in one day, there's risk that it's a bear market rally. In other words, for a sustained bottom, you want to see something go down, even make a couple days of a base, and then start slowly turning around. Okay. So instead, you had this huge move where all the shorts got squeezed out because, believe it or not, if you're short STRC, you have to pay the dividends to whoever you borrowed the stock from, because you have to borrow stock and then short it. That's how equities work. So nobody wanted to pay the dividends, so everybody covered their shorts all at once because Mike comes out with this headline. Strategy opens the door to selling Bitcoin under new capital plan. Now, before I go into like some of the details as to what that is, essentially Mike said, we're open to selling Bitcoin to pay our bills. Now, that was super bullish for for MSTR and STRC, hence the squeeze. But here's the problem. Bitcoin did not go up at all. At all. In other words, you had these two products go up 60%. I'm sorry, 12%, and Bitcoin sat there at 60K. Then, of course, you have to ask yourself, what happened with all this bullish news? Like, why didn't it go up? Why didn't Bitcoin go up? Now, here's the announcement from Strategy. And now it's called a new digital capital framework. We need to get off the digital capital term. That was, chat GBT in the men's room. It sounded great, but we got to get rid of that. So Strategy increased its reserve to $2 billion, representing 17 months of dividend coverage. That's not long enough. They got to do something, and they got to do it now so that they have like 2 years of coverage, which would create a huge short squeeze in Bitcoin, because they should do it, the selling of Bitcoin, all at once. I'll talk more about that. So they raised the STRC dividend. They're actually paying more to the people who lent them money. Now, Strategy has established a monetization program where they'll sell Bitcoin for dividends and interest expenses. And they'll also repurchase MSTR. Okay, so let's unpack that. So what Mike is saying, we're open to buying Bitcoin to support STRC, the debt product, and MSTR, the stock product. But he says we're open to it. Like, we're not doing it. In order for this to end, and I've said this 27 times, and I'm going to say it 27 more times. If Mike would just sell the Bitcoin and get 2 years worth of reserves, the stock would fly, and so would Bitcoin, because the sale would be over. He can call an investment bank and say, hey, take this $4 billion in Bitcoin, or whatever it is, 2-3 billion at least. And then the investment bank is like, yeah, sure, we'll take it. Then the investment bank will go out and buy bullish bets on Bitcoin, bullish bets on MSTR, bullish bets on STRC, or just flat out buy all this stuff, knowing full well that as soon as the uncertainty is over, it all goes straight up. In other words, you eliminate the Bitcoin overhang. You just eliminate the entire story. It's over. Okay, so saying you're willing to do at least some of it, okay, so you blow out the shorts, right? And this comes back to an old bear market term, actually 2 of them. Beware the failed rally and don't feed the bear. So what Mike did was, okay, he got STRC and MSTR to move, but Bitcoin didn't go with it. Those YouTube headlines like, is it a trap? Every YouTube headline has trap in it. I'm doing it too. Is it a trap? Because, Bitcoin should have gone up when he made this announcement. Didn't happen. And then Bitcoin turns around and goes down, right? Okay, so someone is asking, this is a good question. What do you think about BTC going to 52K and ETH going to 900 or 1100 and Tau going to 100? Okay, so let's talk about that. Patreon has what I call the Saylor Endgame. In other words, if this continues, how does it end? How does it all end? Now, I know on charts that you can draw 52K. You can. And a lot of guys have done it. And, I'm doing Princess's stream later in today. She had it before everybody else. Actually, Benjamin Cohen had it too. And I know you can draw 52K, and we'll talk about why. Because it's the same format. It's the same formation as MSTR. And there's a new Bitcoin formation that's similar. So, yes, you can have a situation where Bitcoin TA is like, pouring a full glass of water out, where it just kind of waterfalls lower. I hate that, because that has nothing to do with Bitcoin as a currency. I hate talking about 52K Bitcoin, but hedge funds are going to pick on this thing. They're just going to pick on it. They're just going to keep shorting it, because they're so angry that, they're just so angry that they can't pick on NASDAQ. They can't pick on NASDAQ. So they're picking on strategy and Michael Saylor, right? Bitcoin bulls have a breaking point. Everybody's got a number. So, what is the breaking point for Michael Saylor? So that's nice. And then, we have, I don't know if this is a reverse indicator or not, but Cathie Wood, who sometimes makes good trades on like Tesla and then sometimes buys the high in tech stocks, is buying Coinbase and Circle and Robinhood. Now, here's the deal about this. Like, Amazon released something that they're going to let machines trade in USDC. Now, I noticed that doesn't include regular cryptos, that AI agents are going to trade with each other using USDC, which is why Cathie Wood is buying Coinbase and Circle, because they're like the USDC pairs trade. In other words, they both benefit from USDC. But oh my God, like, where's the settlement in other cryptocurrencies? It's like, what's up with that? So the good news about crypto is USDC. Yuck. Hedge funds are picking on Bitcoin, and Saylor won't end the negative story. Like, it's simple. It's like hedge funds are going to lean on Bitcoin until Saylor sells. That's what they're thinking. Like, that's their big short fantasy. Vision Pulsed Fat Boy says XRP is garbage. We will talk about an XRP headline, which in the past would have driven XRP higher, but let's stay on Michael Saylor for just a second. So even though strategy authorized all these purchases, they said we might do it. That's not the end. They have to say we will do it, or we have done it. Now, here's the Bitcoin TA that you need to know. Okay. So problem number one is that, Bitcoin, or at least one component of Bitcoin, broke out of this triangle formation. Okay. There's two actually. So there was a triangle here, and when Bitcoin broke down at the apex, all right, it waterfalled lower. Not good. Now, this triangle has morphed into a new triangle. Now, if the breakout from this triangle is the same as the breakout from that other one, I mean, you would travel, I don't know, maybe this distance from the point of a potential breakdown, which is 40. God, 40. Can you believe that? That's insane. And, we were looking in Bitcoin for something that would, I don't know, perhaps be a little bit more positive on the TA side. You just can't get it. This has been the problem the entire time. Now, we had this in some symbols, but you had this expanding range formation in MSTR, right? Strategy stock. These things are normally bullish, but in this case, it broke out on the downside, came back, retested this. Wait, let me make sure TikTok can see this. Comes down, retests it, and then falls apart. A classic. It's like, it's almost old-fashioned TA, right? That downside target is 54 for strategy. Strategy is now at 85. That would be another 58% down. And you're like, oh my God, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? And then there's IBIT. This is the Bitcoin ETF. And of course, we'll show the news headline, but people just continue to sell this thing. People just continue to bail out of the Bitcoin ETF. So you had hedge funds picking on, Michael Saylor. Then you have this freaking thing. Now, it hasn't broken out of the bottom yet. That's the good news. But I mean, if it did, you're talking about a huge drop in the Bitcoin ETF from 32 to 20. Because I mean, these formations have been, they've been working. I don't know if it's in total crypto market cap or not. No, it's not. But so is this triangle that we just talked about. So at the end of the day, if you start looking at Bitcoin, you can start drawing 51, 54. You can start drawing all these nasty formations. Meanwhile, as if it's just so painful to watch. Okay, NASDAQ squeezes everybody back above the 21-day moving average again. Like hedge funds sell, Robinhood buys, and Robinhood retail winds up being right. Are you kidding me? And this is like a competing thing with Bitcoin. I mean, there's no question about it that NASDAQ going up is not good for Bitcoin. It just isn't. Right? And then you see the open in MSTR, right? Like maybe we got to look at a 4-hour chart on this. Or maybe even, yeah, let's go 4-hour. Let's try 89 minutes, right? So, MicroStrategy has a monster squeeze yesterday, and then beware the failed rally. And now it's down 8% on the open because Bitcoin is down. So, I mean, basically, Michael Saylor fed the bear by promising something that he's not delivering on yet. He's not delivering on this. And you have Bitcoin, right? If you go back to the Bitcoin chart, this is a possible waterfall, which of course no one wants to talk about, unfortunately, but we have to. I hate this. We have to talk about this because what happened on LuxAlgo, right, was that Bitcoin not only went down, but LuxAlgo inserted a resistance shelf above the market. So Bitcoin went down and then it tries to go up, but then there's this like resistance shelf. And then Bitcoin can't get above that. So the next thing you know, Bitcoin is trying to break out of the bottom of this thing, which, when you have these kind of triangles, normally it's bullish. When you have downward sloping things, it's like the market presses, and then snap up. But if it presses, and then breaks down, it literally could be a waterfall. Just, it could just go. You can't believe how much I hate this because what it does is it feeds the 4-year cycle narrative. It feeds this whole idea, like all these guys are talking about, this is the last stage of the bear market and it should end in October, but it's going to be so horrible that everybody who's bullish Bitcoin becomes bearish Bitcoin. And then it reverses, which is why in Patreon, I published the Saylor Endgame, right? There's like a full moon based thing for regular TA, but then the Saylor Endgame with like a white paper and PowerPoint and even something that Michael Saylor would say at the end of this. So, I mean, that's worth listening to, because if you want to talk about like what the downside target is, if this all goes wrong. And so far, like somebody inside strategy was like, okay, let's see if we could promise the market that we'll sell Bitcoin. Or let's say, we can make a little bit of a, we can massage it. All right. And then I don't think anybody believes it like this. Okay. Now, here's the great news. Like, here's Beeple and everybody going, pointing to Mike, going, yeah, shame on you. Right. But, the guys at StormRake who help our channel, their attitude is they have people buying at 60. Because if Michael Saylor ever did the right thing, 60 would not only hold, but it would skyrocket higher. And their attitude is, because this is potentially forced selling, like they're looking to dollar cost average all the way down to 45. And again, it's a group of guys who you can call and talk to rather than just some blank exchange that, if you have a customer support issue, you never get through. And they have thought leadership and research as well. And their research says, I think what everyone else says at this point is that there's on-chain metrics from prior cycles. It's good work. And it basically says we're close to the end, but we're not there yet. So is the end 60, 58, 52, 45. Everyone has a target. Really, honestly, it depends on two things. One is whether Michael Saylor eliminates the story. And the second thing we have, actually, there's three things. There's the dollar story, and we'll get to the third thing in a minute. But there's the dollar story, and you're like, what dollar story? There's a dollar story? Yeah, there is. Okay. Because to add to this blank storm, okay, the dollar versus the yen has made a new high, and there's record distress in the Japanese currency. So when the dollar rallies, the yen falls. And as you can see with this little candlestick, the dollar will not stop going up. This is a killer for Bitcoin. It's a killer, right? Like dollar up, gold, silver, Bitcoin lower, right? Hey, gold and silver are doing okay, but Bitcoin's getting monkey hammered, right? And if you look at this and you're like, I don't understand why this is a big deal. It's a very big deal, because if you look at the dollar versus the yen, if you have a breakout in the dollar on like a monthly or a quarterly basis, which we're coming up on, even though there's resistance here, it's breaking out of a high all the way back from 1990. And you got to ask yourself, if the yen weakens and the dollar strengthens, there is no technical analysis resistance to stop the dollar from some sort of parabolic rise against the yen, because there was no support on the way down. So there may be no resistance on the way up. So now Bitcoin has two problems. You have Michael Saylor and you have this dollar story. Now, the Bank of Japan is trying to stop this. They're out of money. They're out of money. And the only way that stops is if the Fed prints money and gives it to the Bank of Japan, or the Fed gets involved with the printer itself to try and stop this. And guess what? There's no sign of them trying to stop it. So you have two problems now. You have Mike, who won't admit there's a problem, and you have the Fed that won't admit that there's a problem. Because I don't even know what happens if the Japanese currency, just waterfalls lower and the dollar rises. I mean, what's the scenario for a currency collapse in a major G7 or G3 country? Like, what is that? And how many headlines do you have about it? Not that many. Like I don't see people covering this at all. Like at all. No one is talking about this. And guess what? You have to talk about it. You do. Now, more funny stuff. All right. So Wall Street, which, some people at Wall Street were married to MicroStrategy stock or strategy stock MSTR. They're starting to cut their long-term upside price target. So we just talked about how strategy could go from 80 to 50 on TA. And these guys, amusingly, are cutting their price target all the way down to 260. All the way down to 260. Isn't that great? Right? In other words, we only think it's going to go to 260 when it could go to 50. Like, are you seeing the denial? There's denial out there. And then the question is, how does it end? You could have a dramatic ending because you could have Saylor admitting that, okay, I'm selling Bitcoin now, or you could have the Fed coming in and saying, enough is enough. Enough is enough, right? So, when does this happen? Okay, well, it's not happening now, which is why you have this waterfall lower. Now, you do have some positive developments, which is such a shame that, the focus is totally on Bitcoin. It's a shame because like BlackRock Securitize is going to go public on Thursday. Right? There's going to be a merger, and then, like security tokens or stocks on the blockchain or, bonds on the blockchain are happening. And, you're either going to be trading that on Hyperliquid or, a lot of banks are rolling this out. They have to, because the big clearinghouse wants to trade on Stellar, which is another unbelievable story that's getting absolutely swept under the rug. In other words, Stellar, even though Stellar is higher, Stellar is now caught in this Bitcoin trade, right? Like Stellar was way up and then it comes back down. Now, the good news is there's a ton of support in Stellar. Like that's what's working for the market right now. And that's the only thing working for, well, actually, no, there's one more thing. Okay. Now, the fate of the free world lies with Solana, period. Right. Online trading is picking up, right? The stablecoin narrative is enormous, right? Machines using USDC. And then there's this idea of security token trading. All a perfect thing for Solana. Solana marketing is internet capital markets. Okay. Now, Solana TA is actually pretty good. It's pretty good. I mean, you have this downward sloping wedge, which again is normally bullish. And then you have Solana breaking out of this thing here, right? It breaks out, right? It actually even breaks out above a trend line, which is a Luxalgo trend line. Because again, the cool thing about Luxalgo is that it automatically draws these things. You don't have to sit around and take a day off from work to draw trend lines, right? It does it for you. And then Solana breaks out. So you have kind of a double breakout, and it breaks above the green wavy line, which is the 21-day moving average. Okay. That's why yesterday I was like, yeah, Solana, let's go. Even though you didn't get the Bitcoin rally that you would have wanted off the big squeeze in Michael Saylor stock products, you got to break out in Solana. Now, Solana then today on Bitcoin weakness comes back and retests the 21-day moving average, which is not terrible. It's not terrible at all. It's not. And even though, XRP is hovering above $1, you do have positive XRP news. Okay. They want to test a lending protocol, a proposed upgrade that would enable institutional on-chain lending, credit markets, and tokenized assets if approved, which of course it would be, right? Giving XRP Ledger a shot at this tokenization game, which, to be completely honest with you, you don't hear much about the way BlackRock wants to operate on Ethereum. Ethereum has a catastrophic marketing problem. So you have at least a positive news headline for Ripple and a positive technical analysis scenario. And frankly, this is classic. At some point, we got to see the Fed address what's going on in the U.S. labor market, because the lizards over at Meta, right, are opening up a blue-collar workforce program so that everybody who gets tossed from their company can go learn how to build stuff, which I kind of like. I like it. It's a good PR move, and it makes sense, right? Like if you're not doing spreadsheets and PowerPoints and you're a physically able person, why not do some retraining? Now, again, it's scary because the lizards know how many people they're going to put out of work. Bill Gates is all over the tape with that kind of disaster P, whatever. Okay. I don't like these people. I don't trust these people, which is why I want a decentralized future. But I think the Fed is eventually going to have to address labor market growth outside of data centers. In other words, we have to start looking at the world ex data centers. And if we ever did, this whole idea of Warsh wanting to cut rates could surface. Warsh also may have to cut rates to stop the dollar from going up. No one has talked about this yet. And of course, why would they? Because, everybody's picking on Bitcoin. The hedge funds, everybody's picking on Bitcoin because you had a failed rally. Essentially, MicroStrategy stock went up. Michael Saylor made these positive comments and no one's buying it. But, you have counties in California that if you make $100,000, you're considered low income. This has to get addressed at some point, just probably not today. Just not today. Okay. Because what you have today, honestly, is you have ETF selling. You have everybody bailing out. That's what's seemingly kind of catastrophic, is if you have hedge funds picking on Bitcoin with the general public, who is more powerful than hedge funds, at least today, is dumping Bitcoin. And, you would think, oh, that doesn't matter. Actually, it does matter. It matters now. It matters now, right? So this yen weakness thing and all this other stuff, okay, here's the, I was looking for the Bitcoin ETF stuff. This is the BlackRock nightmare. IBIT alone shed 300 million. The sell-off lands as the AI trade that crashed Korea a week ago now powers a record quarterly rally. So in other words, this is NASDAQ thing, right? All the tech stocks crashed and then all the tech stocks came back. They won't stop buying it. And you know what? I should have known. I don't know if you saw the headline that the orange man has installed like a big golden bald eagle emblem on the White House, like giving the White House some more Trump Tower flavor. And I'm starting to get a little bit more excited about the 250th anniversary of America, particularly if, the Americans pull off at least a respectable performance at the World Cup. But, I get concerned that the Fed is propping up NASDAQ and they will just never let NASDAQ go down. Like that's like closet fear. NASDAQ has obviously got to correct. I don't know if that's the fall or what, but they just won't let NASDAQ go down. And I'm afraid that's the plunge protection team and the orange man going, we're not having equities go lower on July 4th. That's the 250th birthday of America. And I'm like, oh my God, shut up. Please just stop it. So the narrative for Bitcoin isn't there. It's not terrible. Like if you go back to the Bitcoin TA, right? The positive angle is that you're just at the bottom of the trend line. You're just at the bottom of the triangle. Like this hasn't broken out yet. And Bitcoin is at its discount zone, which is this green area here. I'll just draw it so you can see it better. Like, can you believe they're selling Bitcoin into the discount zone? I mean, so I'm flipping this around, right? So the triangle, if it breaks out, is terrible. But, they're selling Bitcoin into the discount zone. All right. And, it's crazy. Now, interestingly enough, the Bank of International Settlements, which, I'm not sure if they're globalist lizards or not, but they're actually warning that, if this AI bubble thing ever burst, it can have implications for the entire financial system. Now, why are they saying that? Like, what makes them say that? This is a positive Bitcoin thing, by the way. In other words, if anybody ever realized, this is Oracle. So this is the first tech company to actually get in trouble because of too much debt for building out AI and phony baloney accounting, meaning, they would invest in OpenAI, give them 250, million or billions of dollars, right? So they would buy a stake in OpenAI, give them money, and then OpenAI turns around and spends that money on Oracle products. So that seems kind of funny, and that's going on everywhere. So this Bank of International Settlements headline is good to know because, Oracle stock collapsed and it can't stop going down. And, you have a lot of hyperscaler stocks that have been down, that they're almost super cheap. So that's what the BIS is talking about. Now, what you need is a perfect storm to end the down move in Bitcoin. And here's the perfect storm, right? Saylor admits there's a problem and takes action to raise money. In other words, he sells. He's just got to sell it, build up 2 or 3 years of reserves, and that's it. That ends the negative Bitcoin story. And then the Fed has to come in and cut rates, either because tech stocks got hammered or stocks got hammered, or there was some kind of realization that there's an accounting problem or some sort of big issue that causes a waterfall lower in these tech stocks. And he's got to do something to stop the dollar from going up. So, everyone focused on the fact that Warsh said, I want inflation at 2%, and they assumed that meant he was going to be super hawkish. I think the guy's buying himself time until he can cut rates, but that's not today. And if you want something that's even more positive, everybody's going to puke out of this Bitcoin ETF. And then what happens if they realize that they got to buy it all back? That, oh no, We just got uninvested in something that turns around. In other words, all this bearish stuff becomes bullish. Now, again, at what price level does all this happen? In other words, is there a Rectember scenario where this thing gets knocked around? Now, I thought this was going to be a positive summer. Like, we were looking for the summer rally. We were looking for July and August to be hot on the upside. And if Saylor does something to end the story, it will be. There is a, when you eliminate that overhang, that's it. Dollar or no dollar. But if you have the dollar problem and you have the Saylor problem and you have everybody bailing out on the ETF, that's kind of a triple threat along with this NASDAQ problem that just makes you want to just, I talked about this with Toby in the YouTube member area where, in crypto, we're just all green with envy. We're green with envy. We can't stand it. I can't stand it. And it's causing people in crypto to get super discouraged. Now, we have said over and over and over again in the YouTube member area that, you can get focused on whether it's 58 or 52. And then you can think to yourself, when Warsh is cutting rates and every fiat currency is garbage and our deficits and all these things come back to haunt us, you won't care whether you paid 58 or 52 when Bitcoin is in the next cycle and the Fed has turned it around. You won't care because Bitcoin will blow through the all-time high. Just the question is, again, can we eliminate the negative story? Just like last cycle is, are we done with FTX yet? That FTX liquidation, thank God this is not a total disaster for the whole crypto system. It's just Saylor. But you're not going to care one day if it's 58 or 52. And frankly, this 40K YouTube target, which was super edgy, that was Benjamin Cohen and Princess and, Army Piper and these guys were all talking about that. And a lot of analysts are saying that 45 would represent the unwind of the entire Bitcoin uptrade that started with the ETF. But that is now all over YouTube. It's everywhere, right? Everybody has it because there's nothing else to talk about. Now, again, everybody's all wound up. I would prefer to focus on whether or not Solana holds, because I think Solana could lead this whole market out of, the pooper. And if you look at, say, a quarterly chart of Bitcoin, because, today is the end of a quarter. So sometimes I like to play with long-term charts. Okay, here it comes. There's two ways to look at this chart, right? Like the Fibonacci circle did not act as support. The 21 quarter moving average is at 59K. So just so you know, this is basically the entire history of Bitcoin because every candle is 3 months, right? So, this is very important in terms of Bitcoin holding the 21 quarter moving average. Like everybody has like the 100 week, the 200 week. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. So I would like to see Bitcoin close today above 59. I would really love to see this thing come back and actually close above 60, which would mean, this long-term moving average is holding. You've also got this. Okay. So, if you go all the way back to the end of the bear market, the open and the close for the two candlesticks that made the top. So not the wicks, the open of this candlestick, the red one, right? Well, the open of the red one and the close of the previous green one are at 58.9. So on a quarterly basis, if you want to talk about something positive, if 58 or 59-ish holds on a quarterly close, I would love 60. Two things would happen. One, you'd be holding long-term support for now. And two, you would not have a breakdown below this, outside the bottom of the waterfall trend line. So, you would delay a bearish formation and you would hold long-term support. Wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't it be nice? Right? That's why if Mike ended it, that's why it would be glorious. Or if the Fed or the Bank of Japan come in heavy to stop the yen, because the yen is out of control, right? If they let the foreign exchange market, say, we don't care about what's happening, okay, that would be not good. What do I think about the monthly buy signal? I'm assuming you're talking about the mark. I think when it comes to any of these other systems, you have to have some kind of reversal. You can have signals, you can have, bottom signals, but you've got to have a sustainable rally. Right now, again, Bitcoin, no rally, nothing. Saylor's products up 12% in one day and zero Bitcoin rally. None. Okay, so that's not good at all, obviously. But it's early in the day, and we're going to hope that Bitcoin at least holds its ground and gets back above 60. Because remember, if that did happen, that would create some kind of reversal in Solana. Solana and Bitcoin holding support would be very positive because you would have Bitcoin holding long-term support, Stellar holding long-term support, and a possible validation of the Solana breakout. See, you thought it was all going to be negative, right? It's not. It's not if you can get something that holds together. If Bitcoin falls apart today and Solana falls apart, it's kind of a big day from a TA perspective. Okay. So that is the market update for today. I'm headed over to hang out with Crypto Princess. So check out her YouTube channel or look at my channel or my Twitter because I'll retweet the stream. But that is the market update for today. Before we leave, definitely want to thank StormRake. Still think you should open up an account and get their wisdom. And I want to thank the Spartans in Patreon and our YouTube members. We did small coin alpha this week out the wazoo on the YouTube member area. Like, what do you want to buy if this goes down or if it doesn't? And don't forget the Saylor Endgame in Patreon. Friends, we will see you tomorrow.